birthday. So this week, we're going to be talking about communicating sustainability in different fields. Today with us, we have Mateusz. He's an expert in circular economy. This year's interviews is also part of the Italian Ministry for the Environment Initiative, Agenda All for Climate. It will take place, this year's events will take place from now until September, and there's a whole agenda line of other events, which is very interesting. So Mateusz, expert of circular economy, he has 8 years of international experience with sustainable materials and innovation. You also are a business developer for new material technologies and products, which you're going to touch upon today when you speak to us about this. You're founder of Ævolution Circular Material Innovation. So thank you for being with us today, Mateusz.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. I wouldn't have been here without this one.
That is true. So Mateusz, to begin with, would you like to tell us a little more about your job and circular economy?
Sure. For this, I have prepared a little presentation that we can actually jump right into because it's going to serve as a guideline for all the questions. Just let me share my screen and let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Again, thanks a lot for the invitation. Yeah, I'm Mateusz Wielopolski. I'm a chemist by training. I did a PhD in physical chemistry and worked for a long time in research and development, and then a couple of years in the industry. And then, as you mentioned, I founded my own company in the field of circular materials innovation. And also did, due to my passion for sports and then also the interest in the sports industry, did an MBA in sports management, and somehow combined it all in the expertise and the field that we're working in with my company. And I give you a bit of a background about how this whole how the whole journey, so to speak, developed over the years, and how I came to the point that I'm speaking today at this event about circular economy. Yeah, so as already has been mentioned, that's the name of my company, and we're focusing on the implementation of sustainable material technologies, of circular product design, circular product solutions into either existing products and applications, but also do a lot of new product development based on my expertise in materials and material science, of course, with a very strong focus on material technologies. And that's also something that we can talk about later, because due to my background, I've experienced materials being a very strong enabler and driver of circular economy solutions and then circular product design. Yeah, so we cover actually all the different stages of product development, focusing mainly at small and medium enterprise solutions and startups, where we can actually work very focused on a certain or specialized product solution, and then work very intensive on a project where we can do research and development, we can do project management or take over project management tasks and then really implement solutions, but also simply give advice and coach. Then I'm also teaching at the university, and based on this prepare and guide workshops on circular economy, circular design, material technologies, and the implementation of material technologies into product solutions. And then within the network, there is also a big overlap with a lot of different stakeholders from various fields, especially in the research and innovation area. So one very interesting and inspiring activity is, of course, sustainable product design, because it touches upon various disciplines, really from the beginning of a product idea till the end of the product development stage. Yeah, as mentioned, since I'm a chemist, my background is pretty much focusing around materials. Within the last couple of years, I was focusing, I will tell you why and how this came to it, but I was focusing on bio-based polymer solutions, composite solutions, natural fiber solutions, and these relatively new material technologies that are also a key enabler of sustainable product solutions. Then, of course, strong focus is also on the entire product design in terms of circular economic aspects and cradle-to-cradle value chains. And then that's actually naturally connected to the material aspects is, of course, the processing technology, which goes hand in hand with product design and materials in the end. Yeah, but I wasn't a circular economy expert from the beginning, so that was a long journey which stands behind it. And I think it was mostly driven by passion and by curiosity, so to speak. So that's something which I want to start with. The passion is sports, or represented by the sports activity here, and the curiosity is represented by the unknown behind the edge of this mountain. So as I mentioned, I started actually off as a chemist, as a physical chemist with a background in laser spectroscopy, working in photovoltaics, and working a lot with quantum chemistry and theoretical physics, and characterizing new polymer materials for photovoltaic cells. And at one point, I was simply curious to do something else, and started jumped into a new job, which was completely out of field, which was the development of bamboo composite materials in Singapore. And that kind of opened a new perspective and a new view on materials, because it was much closer to applications and actually to real products. So this was something that I was doing with the ETH Zurich in Singapore, with the Faculty of Architecture, where we had a very interdisciplinary and very inspiring and dynamic team, and it was a great time where we could really explore completely different applications, different for everyone, in different fields of applications, and also different fields of expertise. Yeah, and developing a material from scratch was something new for me, and something also which already put me into this area where you don't focus on one certain field of expertise or technology, but rather onto the relationships and the links between the different disciplines or areas of activities and so on. So what we discovered was, or what we were looking into was actually how to transform a low-tech resource into a material that was then serving as a platform for applications in very different fields. And this was something very, very different from what I was doing before, because before that I was an expert in a very certain field. There was a bunch of people all over the world who understood what is it all about, and then suddenly you came out of this little, yeah, I would say, little safe place of very specific expertise into something which is very broad and has a potential and provides entry points or doorsteps into different fields of applications, different areas of industry, different areas also of business and research and development, because it's not only concerned about developing a technology and then giving it away to someone who's going to sell it, but it was all interconnected within this project that would directly look into products and applications with the technological developments. Yeah, and that's how to sum it up. So kind of before that, I was focusing on the, let's say, materials, and then there was the people who were doing the applications of these materials, and then suddenly I could connect this material expertise with the applications and what's all around. And that's something which brought me to, or which brought circular economy to me, basically, because this was for the first time where I had to deal with a kind of more broad and holistic perspective of what I was doing. And that's actually, yeah, the essence, so to speak, also of circular economy, where you step one step outside the whole circle, and then you look at the circle from the outside, and then you discover the different aspects and different stages of a product life cycle or a service and so on. And that's what's represented here in this graphic here. And what's actually driving in what's most inspiring and motivating in this whole field is to understand actually the relationships and to bring together different aspects of products and applications and services, and combine, for example, sustainability, then of course with profitability and performance. So there is the most inspiring piece of this work is actually finding these connections and the links between sustainability, performance, and profitability, especially when you work on applications that are already in the market or are targeting a certain industrial application. Yeah, and if you understand these relationships, and the next passion that I like or that is motivating me is not only to have it all in a nice picture and have it all in a nice presentation, but actually to try to implement it into real products and into real projects and developments. And of course, since my strongest background is in materials, so the focus of our activities is on sustainable product design, concentrating around material solutions, which is not only about, of course, the type of materials that you use, but also about how you use those materials, and which context you use them, and how you implement them into a product or application design in the end. And that's something which brings us to the most famous picture, of course, about circular economy, which probably you've all seen somehow, and I'm not gonna go into details with this, but I think the most for me, the most interesting and the most important thing out of this representation is that it's all kind of in a closed system. So that's something that that is the essence also of circular economy for me, is this system thinking and seeing things in interrelationships with other things and not separate from each other. And this transferring this onto product development and application development and research and innovation activities, that's something that that is the most exciting thing about circular economy when you want to create impact. So just to finish up now, as with a slogan, I think also that's a personal motivation for me being in technology and science is that it gives you an opportunity to, just like many other fields, but this one gives you also a very strong opportunity to be part of solutions that can have strong impact on social issues, and of course in the context of our today's interview, especially with material solutions, also a strong impact on the climate change and climate protection. This would be it.
Thank you very much. Actually, we have John. So thank you, John, for joining us today as well. I think before we move on with a more related question to communication and your journey, maybe you can clarify the difference between biological and technical materials. John asked this question. I think it's important for our listeners. I think he made a good point. Yeah.
Well, because to say it very simple, and I think this is one of the essence of circular economy, is to put things simple, because you need to have very clear communication between different stakeholders, because the circular economy is about communicating with interdisciplinary, which is very important. So to put it very simple, I think you can say that the biological cycle is concerned with renewable materials that are bio-based, and the technical cycle are materials that are created by us, by the humans.
Thank you. I think that was useful, at least as we pursue this conversation. So maybe the first question that comes to mind is the difference in your journey when it comes to actually talking about this. So initially, maybe you approached this field not really knowing that the term that identified was about circularity. So about the idea that you shouldn't have, it should all come back because you don't release anything out, you don't pollute, and there's as little waste or not at all. Of course, left out as a second product. So how did it change? What do you think has changed, and why has it become suddenly so important?
Well, I think this is actually also explaining the difference between the two cycles, the biological and technical cycle. What I was kind of brought to this whole topic not by a passion for circular economy, or as you just mentioned, I didn't even know the term by that time, and what it means, But then it was kind of very logical when working on the development of these bamboo composites, or something that was just feeling unnatural, that you bring together a natural resource like bamboo, and then you use some technically made resins from crude oil, for instance, and then you put it together and make a new material. So this was just didn't feel right, because you mix something which then is becoming kind of technical because it cannot be renewed anymore. So the motivation was how can you take the inherent features of this material and the inherent features of the other material and keep it in a product that is not leaving a negative impact on the environment. And then you have to obviously automatically think about the whole life cycle. And then you have to think about where's the resource coming from, where does it go in the end? And that's how you start automatically thinking in this logical loop terms. And then suddenly we were doing this already for a couple of years without even knowing that this is called circular economic thinking. And then suddenly it just popped out in in the public, in the media, and in politics, and became more and more important. And then you realize that that's something that's the most logical thing to do in the end if you want to reduce the impact.
So it kind of makes me wonder, so it's human nature that we have to categorize everything. We kind of have to feel to pin up term there. Do you think that, since you're saying that this was done even before you had pinned a term to it, or like the system had pinned a term to it, do you think that, however, giving it a term to it actually diminished its speed in which it could be applied, since it appears to be so logical that businesses should do it regardless, or at least try to apply it to a maximum extent in which they can, or actually by categorizing this business model, because it is also considered a business model, it could help companies choose that way of working faster? Yeah.
Well, I think if you term it in a way, you have a chance to communicate it in a much easier way, and then you don't have to always start a conversation about explaining something, but you have a term, and then people who are interested in something and they don't get the full explanation, at least they know where to search for more information, or which term you need to use to search for more information. Definitely, it also gives it a lot of potential to create attention and to create awareness. And I think, of course, this is nothing new, and there has been circular economic principles in business, but also in product development, especially circular design, already decades before the term was revived as it is now. But I would not agree that it actually slows it down. I would actually say that this helps a lot the industry and the companies to somehow find their position and their role in the whole system, because I think that's at the moment the most difficult thing for companies and also individuals who try to understand the different aspects of circular economy and the different aspects of circular product design, is to get the entire holistic view on the whole system. It's a lot about systems thinking, and this is something that has been also investigated in economics, in product development, and so on for many years. But it's a very complex thing. So I think giving it a chance to to put it into some context, and also finding the stakeholders, the role where that they are playing in this system, helps actually to identify also the leverage points that each of the stakeholders have. So to say it simple, for example, if you look at recycling companies before, the role of the recycler was considered by everyone else a bit more than the guy who was collecting the trash, maybe. And now suddenly, if you look at the whole system, the recycler gets a completely different role, and some of them don't even see that they can be actually resource and raw material providers, or they can be crucial in a certain material or flow or supply chain, or even for new technology development. And I think this is, for this you need to have some kind of a description also, and some kind of a guiding terminology to be able to identify those roles of these stakeholders, and to actually help or create the right links and the relationships.
Yes, because the reason why I asked was it appears that when not any, but the majority of terms that are pinned in certain things that are more sustainable in the sense of have that approach are maybe not appreciated. This not only by industries, but in general, sort of the, oh my God, this is green. Okay, let's sort of push away a little bit. Not anymore as much, but it used to be a little bit like that. At least that's my impression. So that's why I asked. It is true that it does simplify the application of it. So before I move on to a question that someone asked in the comments, how did the industry discover, oh, I'm applying something and now it has a term? How do you feel your colleagues also approach this way of working?
I don't think the industry was so much focusing on the terminology, but
no, as in approaching it in their industry, like for their business.
Yeah, I think especially in industry, it's still the, what I showed in the presentation. You have the three aspects of sustainability, performance, but also profitability. In many of these use cases that can be ascribed to circular economic thinking, you actually increase the profitability of your business or of your application or solution. So I think that the industry was not so much affected by having this suddenly in the spotlight if you do increase your profitability. Definitely a lot of businesses which were doing this already due to some profitability reasons, but also, of course, because they were convinced about doing something more sustainable, can profit from this, and did profit from this. But I think it was not initiated simply by the shining the spotlight on suddenly. Yeah, especially within the last 12 months, also affected by the pandemic, since the awareness also of the customers and of the consumers grew on these topics. The industry also realizes a higher potential for more profitable business models in the end, if they actually respond to this customer demand for sustainable products and technologies. So that's kind of interconnected, probably with also the spotlight on circular economy, and also with the recovery due to pandemic recovery, focusing on technological innovation. It also happens that since a lot of new funding is going into these technological developments, that promote sustainability, there is definitely also a shift in industrial motivation to go into this direction.
Yes, but do you feel like the conversation is sort of reserved a little more for developed countries and the more privileged, or do you feel like this conversation can be also applied for companies who are located, not outsourced, but are located in developing countries?
That's a difficult question. I think
just your impression and based on your experience.
Yeah, this is something that, because a lot of I would say a lot of these profitability assumptions or a lot of these considerations about profitability are not are not focusing only on a certain region. I think it's rather depends on the supply chains. So if you have developed countries which have located or localized supply chains and do not depend on outsourcing, for instance, to other countries, it's much easier for them to keep their activities the way they were doing it before. And then you have the developing countries where a lot or often they are the end of the supply chain. When this is shifting in the developed world, that the supply chains are being redistributed at the end of the supply chain, the change is also somehow coming in as well, and especially I think because it's not only about materials and about sustainability in terms of energy and resources, but also in terms of material health and safety and supply chain conditions. And since we are now in such an interconnected world that even at each angle of this world, you're gonna get to know what's happening at the other angle. I think also these developing countries have the same potential to change, and they also realize that they have to jump on the same boat, and in the end the benefits are equal for independent on the regions. That if you switch to more profitability or sustainability, it's independent on the region where you look at.
I think this is a very interesting point you make, because I would sort of focus this for governments, because if a small, medium-sized industry in a developing country is trying to become more circular, there are certain expenses there as well. There are a lot of eco labels and standards more applied in Europe or in the States, for instance, but not. I wouldn't necessarily imagine in developing countries, because it can be more expensive. But then the next question I sort of would like to ask you about the COP26. So the COP26 is coming up in November, and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is becoming a big, cool topic this year, because it will determine also when it comes to carbon credits. So as you sort of showed in your diagram, circular economy looks at CO2 emissions within your chain. Do you think that applying more strongly circular economy could help negotiations in making sure that then CO2 emissions are also focused by not developed countries who try to offset in developing countries, but then look at the calculations made within where they're located, although they're emitting elsewhere? Do you think that this issue could be helped by applying circular economy more strongly?
Well, to be honest, I think it's the wrong strategy to actually to make business with carbon emissions. I think it makes much more sense to invest and to push also by the regulatory bodies to push innovation to actually reduce the carbon emissions. So this discussion would not even come up. This is something that is, of course, yeah, the consequence of, you know, developed countries being not caring about their emissions, and then suddenly, oh yeah, we're still in the same world, and now we all have too much CO2 in the atmosphere. So we have to reduce it, but of course other stakeholders who did, or other countries who didn't have the chance of this economic growth as in developed countries, they also want to get to the same stage, and then they have to argue now why they emit more carbon that they should. But it's yeah, it's the wrong, I think it's the wrong discussion to think about having now carbon offsetting schemes will solve the problem. It will maybe stop conflict between, or minimize or mitigate conflict between the developing countries and developed countries. But I think the right strategy would actually be to foster more innovation in order to reduce these carbon emissions, and then also educate, especially because that's what I said. Like, we did this circular economic, or we took those approaches without even knowing about it. And I think if we would have, or at least in our work in my earlier projects, if I would have been educated much earlier, I could have focused those developments much more on reducing carbon emissions or creating more sustainable technologies. So I think, yeah, that's what can help, is definitely educating about circular economic principles and what are the possibilities if you if you take those principles as a guideline for technological innovation in the future.
Yes, I would have comments to that, but I think it opens a wide, big chapter, because I also feel like education and informing people is also who does it, why they do it, who takes part in it, and there's a lot of question. It's true that educating is a key. Forming people, just informing and forming and shaping does help, I guess, be more aware of what they can apply or not, whether they're citizens or even just industry owners. So someone in the comments asked, how do you see ownership? Customers become also suppliers.
Well, that's something that is well, there are a couple of these circular product design guidelines, and I think that's something which is this principle of having or not having the ownership of the product, but as it's kind of going into this direction, like distributing the ownership, is something very powerful, especially since, I mean, just because some resources in some country and claiming that this resource belongs to this country or this company is kind of yeah, egoistic, in that sense that if you use this resource, then you pollute the environment of everyone.
Yes.
So distributed ownership also would create, I think, a bit more responsibility. I think you can all yeah, that's something that is also human, because if you borrow something from someone, you care about this person or you care about this thing, then you will take care of it much more than if you just say, well, in the end I just throw it away, or I don't have any connection that to the resource, so to speak. So, and if you have this distributed ownership, this can create not only much more valuable products, but also a sense of responsibility, which is happening already now in terms of responsibility for the next generation. And that's why I think this is a very powerful principle also that can be applied to product design stemming from circular economy.
I also have comments about that. I always feel like my generation sort of, okay, maybe I can put it this way. It appears that, so empathy, first of all, that's something we touched upon in the interview yesterday. So I think it's very true what you say, and being empath helps you understand what you're affecting. So again, responsibility and so on. I do have the impression that helping the generation that's to come is not necessarily a narrative that is working all the time. But that's because I've had, in certain events I've attended, people come tell me, you are the solution. And I feel like, but you are still alive. You can help us too. So that's the sort of idea that why are you putting this all over me? Like, it's not like, and even though I am not that much older to Fridays for Future, I still feel like that now it's already happening, that they're pinpointing it to 20-year-olds and 18-year-olds, this conversation that you should be responsible, in how you'd speak to big industries that are going to change the future. So I always wonder if it's time to speak that the future is now. And I really like that circular economy, it is very applicable in making sure that what industries do is done with no damage at all. You go for the no damage, but you sort of try to limit damage in that sense. And if we're still, since we're speaking about the future, so what would you like to see more from circular economy if you were to modify it or had any expectations from the future?
Well, I think what we just mentioned, like people taking or understanding and taking the responsibility for the resources that we use, and not seeing them as a commodity or commercial product, but seeing them as a part of a system. And this can be on a technological or product level, so that people realize, well, if I take a plastic bag, simply speaking, that how does it, what is the journey of this plastic bag into my hands, and what is the journey afterwards, and what can it cost? But it can also be on a business level where companies realize, okay, we actually can drive this change, because maybe on a short term we're gonna have to invest, or we're gonna have to change our business model or change our processing. But on a long term, and that's something what's circular economy also implying, is not a short term thinking, but a long term thinking. On a long term, we're gonna not only profit in our business, but also create positive impact and protect the environment, or like whatever you want to call it, but definitely also minimize the negative impact and make for the upcoming generations, make it also a bit easier to continue this journey, rather than saying, well, now let's say you are the generation X or XYZ, whatever, you're gonna solve it, and we can help you a bit, but in the end, I don't care, because in 5 years I'm gonna be retired anyways, and my yacht is waiting for me. So, and I won't see the trash in the ocean because I will be far away from it. I think that's what, as you said, like that's a bit of
what narrative would you add? I mean, one narrative is about either you have to save the world because you're young, or you have to save it because you care, or you shouldn't care? So what narrative would you add?
I mean, for the young generation,
for the older
or?
generation, I guess, maybe. Why should they care if they're going to retire in a couple of years from now?
I think they should not care about their retirement, but they should. And I know a lot of retired people who are caring. Because they take over responsibility and they are curious. So I think they should simply be educated and be curious about what's going to happen afterwards, and what's going to happen with the stuff that we do today, what's going to happen with it tomorrow. I don't know how to put it into a simple narrative.
How did you explain the importance of circular economy when you entered a new company for a job and you had to explain to someone who was 65, the CEO, and he was like, why are we doing this?
Well, since I'm a material scientist, and it's kind of I can bring in this credibility of material expertise or something like this. The simplest thing probably is to say, look, if you want to retire and you want to or you have at least hopefully a long-term view, so you want to have your company thrive after you're gone, to simply look at the profitability. If you look at materials and you can make them reusable or keep them in a loop, you're simply going to save costs. Yes. And that's something which is going to help your company to survive longer, for instance. And if you don't care about it, then at least do it because maybe one of your children's going to work in this company, or your
fair. Yeah. What if the material
costs?
Yeah. What if they're more expensive?
But that's the whole thing about circular economy, is that of course on the if you look from on a short side, and then you think about switching to bio-based materials, let's say it like this, and they might be more expensive at the moment. But if you look then at economies of scale and you see like someone else will also switch to these, then it's on a long term, there is the perspective that it's gonna the price will be competitive, but you don't have to only focus on more expensive material solutions. Simply keep in mind that with applying circular economic principles, you can keep the resource, if you're smart, within what you already have within a couple of loops, and then you're going to save simply on the resource that you're using already today. That's one principle. Of course, it's not always that easy, and it's we speak now on a very high level, and I've accompanied a couple of these developments, and that's difficult, and that's something where you need to put some investment on the table in the beginning, and you need good people, and you need to have a common view, and then you need to have this commitment to do it.
And if we speak instead from a customer point of view, so one maybe it's an interesting anecdote to tell people listening. So we met because you were a lecturer to a course that me and Christian attended on junior expert of circular economy, and I found it was quite inspiring, your quiz at the end of the lecture, where you sort of put words like biodegradable and compostable and so on, and you tried to figure out whether we had understood the difference. And I think that's essential when it comes to being a customer. I go purchase a plastic bottle, and with plastic, we're going to talk more about it this Sunday with John, but any material, and there's a logo on top. And how do you think material choice is communicated to the customer? Do you think it's done well? Because according to our results, it didn't seem so when we took the quiz. So, and we were people who have backgrounds in this field, not exactly circular economy, but at least in science or engineering or even sustainability in general. So it was quite interesting what you did. So yeah, how do you think communication of material choice is done to customers?
Well, I think it should be done in a way that the customer doesn't have to think, because as soon as you start thinking, then you're gonna, or you make the customer think, you're gonna lose a lot of them, because we're simply by nature, we don't like to think too much.
Okay.
And that's something what I meant. There are two most important aspects. Is on one hand, the responsibility of those who bring in those products. They should be aware of this responsibility, so that the customer doesn't have to think too much. And on the other hand, it's the education, and that education can be on both sides. And I think this is something that we're still at the beginning, and I'm really happy that there are initiatives like this course for circular economy engineers, and also at universities there's more and more sustainability courses, and that's something that is crucial, and I think that's going to lead to also a change in communication between those who bring in the products and the customers in the end, because that's what especially your generation is already demanding, is to have an assessment of the sustainability, at least, or to at least know or be interested in what's in there, even if it's not easy to get it right, because even for people who work with materials, it's not easy to go into the real details, and especially with polymers, for instance, it's not always black and white. So as we've seen also in this example, plastics are not a bad thing. It's always about the whole context in which you use them, and again, coming back to the systemic view. So if you understand the system, then it's easier to assess it, and this is something that I don't think you can demand from the customer. So that's why the responsibility will and should still remain on regulatory bodies and those who bring in the products into the market.
So I am aware that you come from an expert of material point of view, but I was just curious about the relationship then. If it's not the customer's responsibility, then what about negotiators, policymakers? If you have to unite communication between applying circular economy and understanding there and negotiators, how can we best communicate that? Because the European Union came out with the circular economy, we can say, bullet points, and they were quite basic. They were a good start, but they're not binding. So how would you increase communication to policymakers on circular economy, of course?
I think that's what's really becoming clear now, and I think that's what's going to happen in the near future, is those links which will be created between those different stakeholders. About 1.5 years ago, I was already involved in an initiative which is still, I would say the name is called 25100. I hope they hear me. It's a great initiative, which is,
we can tag them.
Yeah, definitely. And this evolved from a youth movement which said, well, we don't want to have another Greta, because we want to avoid this gap between those who shape the politics and shape the regulatory bodies and the regulations, and those who actually have to bear the consequences in a way, right? So these interfaces between, let it be young generations and politics, let it be industrial stakeholders and activists, let it be politicians and industry. I think this is something which is gonna grow in the next couple of years, and that's also the essence of circular economy, which is all about interdisciplinarity and communication between different stakeholders. And I think this is the most exciting thing, that if you are aware of these system relationships, then you also have to be aware of these links between those different parties and phases and stakeholders, and to link them together. That's where you need communication and education. And this is, I think, those kind of, like, I would call them now hubs, which gonna link these different stakeholders between each other. That's something that's gonna be growing in the next future, so that these communication channels will be improved.
So we have 10 minutes, but I have two questions. One comes from one of the comments. So, and I think we can touch them for last, simply because it is quite an interesting one. I just had a question that relates to this, which was, since, actually, let's go with the comments, because I think I forgot the one I wanted to ask. Never mind. So applying sustainable solutions when it comes to circular economy, you said that they're profitable, so you can actually, it is better for business. So what are the challenges, and why wouldn't companies apply them? What are those scenarios?
Well, it's I think it's easier to start with sustainable solutions. So I've been in touch. That's why, maybe that's kind of also why I work so much with small and medium enterprises and startups, because it's easier to start from scratch and then build it up to, you know, a new supply chain and so on. Rather than being a large corporate entity which already has a lot of established relationships that have to change. I was a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a presentation of a Cradle to Cradle organization, and they said it's possible, but it just requires everyone to invest time, people, and money. And that's something, yeah, especially in large corporates, it's difficult, because it moves at a slow speed, and you need to have everyone pulling the same strings. The larger the corporation gets, the more difficult it is to get the people aligned. That's why in companies like Nike or IKEA, it actually is coming from the top. So this is something where you need people who can actually really drive it and implement it from the top.
So you're saying that one of the reasons why circular economy could not be applied fully, it is because you have to have everybody sort of on the same page, and it's really hard. Yeah, okay.
It's complicated. Yeah. It's you need effort, or you need to put a lot of effort into it, and it only works when you have everyone aligned. That's why it's easier with startups, and where you have you know, smaller teams which work all together aligned on one thing. Or it happens on a divisional base in larger corporates, where you have a certain I don't know, product team working on some circular product concept. But this holistic, like some stuff like Nike has done, or Chipotle, or these large corporations, that's a huge effort to do, and that takes time.
So, but this could also be applied with companies who are not doing so well financially.
If they have they have the expertise and the experts, and especially the financial possibilities to change things as well, because it all sounds easy on paper, but especially when you look into complex products out of different materials with global supply chains and pricing of which are price sensitive resources. It's not so easy to simply switch from one day to the other.
Yes. So what advice would you give to small enterprises that maybe are not doing that well, but would wish to apply circular economy to their business?
Hire me.
This is not an ad. We didn't sponsor this, okay? Okay. It does make sense. So in simple words, hire a consultant, hire an expert.
No, that's what I meant in the beginning. It's a lot is about education, and a lot is about creating the right momentum and the right visions. So that what happened in the larger corporates where it was successfully implemented, it was by creating the momentum from the top. And you can also create the momentum from any level of corporate. But I think everyone needs to be aligned, and it's a lot about communicating the vision, and then numbers, and then measuring and analysis, because this is then the homework that has to be done in the end.
What about those who say that change should come from, so you say that change should come from above, but there's a lot of the narrative, especially from those above, who say that change should come from the customers. How do you counteract that?
Well, I didn't say that change should come from above. That's just examples from large corporates who made it. It came from the top. And as we said before, it's also difficult for the consumers, simply on taking this example on the materials, to actually understand it. So you will have to it requires a joint effort in the end. But I think the stronger power is definitely above, where you can shift like regulatory, but like what Green Deal, EU, European Union, they can simply shift a lot of funds into a certain technological innovation field, and this already is going to drive. Or they can just simply say, well, we're gonna from next year we're gonna forbid plastic bags, and that's gonna drive the innovation much faster than one or two companies starting to shifting away from commodity products or changing a certain supply chain.
Yeah,
I think that's what history has also shown.
That is true.
It comes from above. Like look at the whole energy switch to renewable energies. If it wouldn't have been subsidized from the top and incentives motivated by regulatory bodies and financial subsidies, would have happened, but not so fast. So there is a strong leverage point.
Yeah, and I feel like what you're saying now kind of opens a wide, much bigger chapter about application of policies, because I do find that the EU Green Deal, it comes with good faith. They have really good, I think it's really good, but it's a starting point. I maybe it's a personal cynical approach, but I do not really believe in application at a more international level when it comes to national. So the EU does a lot of really good things. It's just the nation itself, the member state, that I'm certainly concerned a little bit with. And the communication there, it's sort of also application and enforcement. I think it's a whole different chapter that doesn't directly relate to circular economy only, but I think it does open a really big chapter. And so I think the hour has sort of ended, the time that you given with us. If you don't have any last comments, do you have any last comments, yes, to our listeners?
No, not really, actually.
No?
Yeah, I think if just follow your curiosity. And circular economy is definitely a very broad field where everyone can find something which can enrich or have a or satisfy curiosity in the end. So, and as we said, like the more we get to know about the principles, the easier it will be, and the faster we can foster the change and the transfer.
Thank you very much. So I invite our listeners, by the way, to go check out Mateusz's website. There are really good articles there. And I invite you to meet again tomorrow, 6 p.m. We'll have Umberto Bozzolini on social media. So Mateusz, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks a lot for the invitation.